Hi, good morning. Today is December 18th, 2025, and it is 10:45 a.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and I am recording this video from my home located at the 2302 Britton Ridge Drive, Katy, Texas, 77494. And the house is located in a gated community called Lake Point Estates here in Katy, Texas, and it's very close to, it's like 300 feet away from the house of Robert Mueller, who was the director of the FBI for several years. And it's also very close to the house of Terrell Miller, who is a prominent intellectual property attorney that works with Robert Mueller in these projects that they do. And I know that that might sound random, but all of that is very relevant to this conversation. So today I'm very excited to talk to you because I want to do more. So this is demo D91-9-4. This is the fourth part of the ninth part of the 91 series. Okay, and I'm going to continue on the sequence of showcasing the technology, right? Like the technology that I built based on the index that I got from the Venezuelan Intelligence Services in 2024. But this part of the demo is going to be short, okay? And it's going to be concise, and it's going to be more of a demonstration of the end product. So what I did is that using the same techniques that you saw on the previous segment, so D91-9-3, sorry, that's -2, right? Yes, D91-9-2. In that segment, I worked in a few queries, joined the data with the data from the first appellate court, and we debugged a few things, right? So what I did, I used exactly the same techniques, right? But I took more time to build a more mature product, I would say, right? Because, I was doing that live without even scripting the demo, right, in that session. And so, like you find little things and you get stuck, and it takes some time, right? So that results in that the end product is not super complete, right? It had a lot of missing features, right? Things that I know I could do, but I didn't have the time to do it in that demo, right? Because the demo would be too long. So what I did is that 2 days ago, I started working on a small project, which was to do exactly the same thing, right? But taking more time, right? On my own, like offline, right? And so to build a more mature product. And given that I was going to do that, I took a different court. And through a random selection process, pretty much like the same I described in that demo, I did a very random selection process, and the court that won the selection process was the Supreme Court of Texas. So I did the analysis, exactly the same analysis, but on the cases that have been before the Supreme Court of Texas during the year 2025. That is what I did. So I'm gonna give you a quick walkthrough. Basically, what I want to do here is to introduce you to this finished product. At this point, I think it's a very mature product. I will still keep tweaking it and improving it, but I think at this point it's very mature. And so what I want to do is to share it with you. So anybody who has interest in understanding how the world works, right, could play with this data. And with this product, right, with this dashboard. So the product is a dashboard. It's a complete, finished dashboard that I will keep improving. But for now, I think if I had to put a number to it, I think it's probably 70% complete, right, for this particular court, right. But more than giving you the dashboard, I want to give you the dashboard. But more than giving you the dashboard, I want to give you the framework of using the dashboard and of building this kind of dashboards, because it's constructed, and this is a bit more technical, but it's constructed in a way that you can very quickly and very easily, you can change the pivot or the view of the dashboard, meaning you can, and I'm going to show you some examples of what that looks like, but you will see in this demonstration that I can go from analyzing attorneys to analyzing cases, to analyzing courts, to analyzing judges, right? Using this technique of smearing and aggregation that I described before, which is fundamental to all these information retrieval systems at scale. So that's the game plan. After I do that, because that's the priority, I don't want to get distracted. But after I do that, I will tell you a little bit about the countermeasures that they took when they saw that they started doing this 2 days ago. Because I started doing this 2 days ago. I could have done it through the night, to be honest, right? I could have sat down on the night where they don't have time to react because everything is closed, right? But on purpose, I did it during the days. Like I took 2 days to do this because I wanted to give them the chance to react, right? And I could see the reaction, and I saw it, right? I saw what they did, and I understand, right? I understand, and I think it shows, the way they operate, right? So I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end, but I'm not going to get distracted by that. That's just, kind of a side dish, right? But the main dish is the dashboard. Um, Yeah, so I want to apologize. My eyes are a little bit tired because I've been putting a lot of time into this, right? I think it took me like 20 hours of programming, all in all. So my eyes, I put a bit of a strain on my eyes, but I'm very happy with the product itself. Well, I'm happy with the product, and I'm happy with what I can see in it, right? I can see clearly, and this is my opinion, right? I don't want to draw any conclusions on your behalf. Like I invite you, who are watching this video, to look at this data and draw your own conclusions, right? But from my personal point of view, if you ask my opinion, I think this shows that this is an industrialized process at large scale. And the children are the cornerstone of it, like the targeting of our children, right? I think it is clearly visible. That would be my contention, right? I'm just giving you my opinion. I'm in no position to judge whether that's the case or not, but I see this as a statistician, having worked in this kind of problems statistical problems for more than 20 years. I see this, and to me, it's crystal clear that this is an operation that they do at a scale. And because, like before, sorry for making this introduction, long when it doesn't need to be, but before yesterday, right, when I was going through all this process, sometimes you fall into the, how do I say it? It's not a trap, but it's a dynamic that is really not. It's unproductive, right? You shouldn't think of that way. But you fall into the trap of feeling that you're being targeted, right? Which you are, right? If they're doing this to you, you're probably targeted, right? You are for sure targeted, right? But if you start thinking in those terms, it's detrimental, and it doesn't lead to anything positive, right? But because you see all these things happening to you, and you start thinking, that somehow it's your fault, right? That you caused this, right? But when I saw this yesterday, right, I understood many things. I understood that this is, they are doing it to me, but they also doing it to thousands of people per year, right, across the world. And if you zoom that up over 25 years, they have done this to 25, 30,000, maybe 50,000 people, right? 50,000 parents that they have probably taken their children. So, when you realize the scale of the problem, when you see the scale and you see that you are not the only one, I guess your vision changes, right? Like your understanding of the situation changes, right? In a good way, in a very good way. Because now you know what you have to do, right? So that's one note I want to give you. The other thing I want to tell you, not to tell you, but like to ask you, right? This is more of a favor I'm going to ask you. Is that when you see these things, right, make an effort to not, and I'm asking you this favor because I think it's the best, right, for everybody. Make an effort to not associate the individual with the institution, okay? And I'm not trained in politics, or I have no education on any of those things, but I've seen through my life that in some places where I live, for example, that some political leaders do this thing where they start associating themselves with the institutions, right? Like, I don't know, like for example, back in Venezuela, right? Chavez had this thing where he used to say, "I'm the people," right? He would equate himself to the entire country, right? Or or in some other countries, or I see sometimes in the news, right? Or sometimes religious leaders also do this, right? Where they say, I am the son of God, or I'm the reincarnation of this or that deity, right? Uh, but in the political arenas, sometimes some players associate themselves with the institution, right? Like publicly, they said, I'm the people, or I'm the party, or I'm the country, right? And this is, I have to do research to understand what is the group psychology. There must be a reason. Like they do this for a reason. Like they're not crazy. Right? I understand that there's design behind that strategy, right? But I don't know exactly what is the group dynamic that plays, right? But if you're being targeted by this thing that I'm going to show you in this dashboard, you may also make the mistake to associate the individuals doing this with the institution, right? And that, like, don't go that way, right? Because but first of all, the institutions, how do I say this? The lifespan of an individual, of a human being, is short compared to the lifespan of the institution, right? Some of these institutions we're going to talk about, or you're going to see in this dashboard, have been around for more than 100 years. But these people that are at this moment operating in these institutions have been there for 4 or 5 years, right? So you can't equate the name or what the person is doing to the institution. First of all, it's not good for you, because if you do that, you're going to feel like the institution is attacking you, right? And if you feel that way, you are going to give up, right? And it's not the institution, it's a specific group of people that are abusing the institution. And secondly, right, we can't, because if we start attacking the institution, right, for example, to give you a concrete example, right, I see they're doing this to me. If I start talking, saying bad things about the institution, I'm going to create a damage to the institution, right? Because people are going to watch this video. I know that for a fact, right? I know many people will watch these videos. So whatever I say about the institutions is going to stay, right, in that record of whatever happens, right? And that is a damage that would be permanent, right? So I want to make the distinction very clearly here that if you see anything in this data, this is about the individuals. This is not about the institutions, right? This has nothing to do with the First Court of Appeals or with nothing, like, or with the 387th Court, or like, those are individuals that are temporarily operating in those institutions, right? And that situation itself is temporary and can be reverted, and I'm sure will be reverted, right? But it's not, these are not comments or observations about the institutions themselves. Like, the institutions need to be protected because they are the basis of democracy. And, we can't, if we, I guess what I'm trying to say, if we make the mistake of turning against the institutions, we would be falling into the trap of the Chinese Communist Party, right? Because we would be attacking democracy. So let's not do that, right? Like, let's keep in mind that anything that you see here is about the people that are operating these things, right? The law firms, So anyhow, with that in mind, I'm going to show you the dashboard, right? And I think I already posted the link in the. Yes. So let me start by sharing my screen with you. Okay. Let me see. It doesn't want to work. If not, I will have to close it. I close it. I'm going to open it again. 1 second. Okay. Okay. Okay, so this is the dashboard, okay? The dashboard has 4 pages. Let me see. So far, right? So today is December 18. At this point, it has 4 pages, but I may add more. And the pages are not, you can navigate through the pages on this menu on the left, okay? So let me tell you what this is. This is the same thing I did in front of the recording, right? That I recorded in that demo D91-9-1 and 2, I think were the numbers. Where I joined the data, right, from the geo-index, this geographical database that I obtained from the Venezuelan Intelligence Services in 2024, with data from public records from the First Court of Appeals. And through that process, we identified an individual by the name of Chris Branson, and we identified a case. I think it was the case of somebody by the name Nanes, Paul Nanes, right? Which, by the way, I saw somewhere. I don't recall exactly what I saw it, but that person apparently has security clearance from the government, so that he's a government employee or was a government employee, right, before he got targeted by this. So I think, this is not a smoking gun, but maybe he saw something, right, or said something that caused this reaction against him, right? And I'm not victim blaming. I'm not saying that you should be able to speak your mind. There's freedom of speech, right? If somebody's doing something, you should be able to report them, right? Without having to fear that they're going to take your child or going to put you in prison, right? But I wanted to mention that, right? So that case, I saw, but I don't recall if I have to look. I don't know if I saw in the pipeline or if I saw it in Google. I can't recall, but I saw it somewhere in the last 2 days that he had security clearance. Of some level of security clearance in the government, but I don't know. I can't recall if it was federal government or state government. So I don't know. Might be a reason, right? Might explain why. I don't know. I'm not saying that that's the reason, but it could be. Okay. So anyhow, I did the exact same exercise, but instead of ingesting into this, pseudo pipeline that I created to do this work that I did in front of the recording, the cameras, right? Like I showed you in the demo the last time. I did the same, but ingesting the records from the Supreme Court of Texas, right? Which are the cases, for people that are not familiar with the legal system of the US, these are so the way it works is that there's trial courts, which, is where people normally go, like if you have a legal issue, right? Then that results in an order, right? The judge makes a ruling on, whether he's going to do one thing or the other. And if one of the parties is not happy with that or thinks that, there's reasons to appeal, they can go to a court of appeals and, ask for appellate review. And then if the appellate court says, no, we affirm that decision, or they dismiss the petition or things like that, then that person has, as an ultimate recourse in the state courts, there's still the federal law, right? But in the state system, there's a step above that you can go to the Supreme Court of Texas. And that is the court that I'm using in this analysis. Not the court, the documents, the public records from that court are ingested into this system, and the data is analyzed and augmented and hydrated with geographical data from the attorneys, from the law firms, from the parties, right? And then that is joined with the geographical data in the geographical database that I got from the Venezuelan Intelligence Services in 2024. And the result of that is stored in BigQuery and is further analyzed and then put into this dashboard, right? And this dashboard is the end of that process, of that 4 stages, I think it is. And during that inside of that pipeline, I also compute signals, like derivated signals, that allow me to rank the entities by different levels of aggregation. And I'm going to show you a little bit more what that means. Okay. So let me go to the dashboard itself, right? So this score that you see here in this column, that today, this might change if I change the UI, right? I can very quickly change the UI with this looker system. So it is possible that I change this, and in the future it doesn't look like this. But at this point, on December 18, 2025, this is what it looks like. It would be the 1, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, the 5th column on this table on the first page represents the score. This is the score of crypto points that it has on that database that I got from the Venezuelan Intelligence Services. And in this view is so when it says representative, that is an attorney, okay? So I'm talking about the first page. And what I did is that in different pages, I changed the aggregation point. So in the first page is attorneys. In the second page is cases, I think. No, law firms, okay? in the third page is cases by the case number in the Supreme Court. I could have done the same, but by the case number in the trial court. Okay, but in this view, is by the Supreme Court case number. And on the fourth page, it is by the court case. Okay, because I also want to understand how are these trial courts operating, right? The one that says court case is really the trial court case. Okay, so the lower court. In my case, it would be the 387th court, where George Telfair III has been signing those orders without, giving me a hearing, right? So that's that column, right? So that's the court case in that court, okay? And this is what I was saying, right? Like the way I built this is that it's kind of a framework, right? I can create a new aggregation point very quickly. All I have to do is duplicate one of these pages and change the column that I'm aggregating by, right? That's it. It would take me literally, like, in fact, let me give you an example, right? If I click on edit, right, I can click on, say, page 4. I can click here and say duplicate. Now I have a new page, right? And I'm going to do this one by, I'm going to aggregate it by the appellate court name, for example, right? So, for example, COA, so Court of Appeals District. COA is a common abbreviation in this business, of legal business, for Court of Appeal. So all I have to do is create this page, and then I can come to this table and I can change the court case by the COA district, for example, right? Right. And I can do the same with this table, right? With this chart, for example. I can change the trial court by the COA district. Right? So you see, in a matter of 3 minutes, I have a completely different view of the same problem, right? So this is a very powerful tool, like building these things as a framework. Not as a one-off, right? So I mean, this is more technical, but to do this, what you have to do is when you're designing the pipeline, you have to think, how do you structure the data and how you partition it and things like that, so you can achieve this effect at the end, right? So you have to know what is that you want to do in terms of frameworking this, and then build your data pipeline from the beginning in a way that is conducive to that, right? That's the key. Okay. So I showed you that you can very quickly increment this and do different levels of it. And I have more than 50 fields in this table, right? Anything from name markers to scores in the geo-index and anything, right? You can aggregate by city, by zip code, by street, by suite numbers. Like you can really experiment with things, right? And the other feature I want to show you is that it has these filters, right? So you can filter by a specific attorney, and you can add a new filter as easy as this. You can edit and then just copy the filter and change the field in the filter, and it will just work. You can filter by law firm, by style. Really means the case title, right? What is the title case? So, for example, you can look here for my name, right? And if you do that, this is the case that I have in front of the Supreme Court right now. And you can see that the two attorneys are Troy Pickett, who has been associated by the system with the Hunt law firm in Katy, and has a score in this crypto payments database of the Venezuelan Intelligence of 2.6 million points. So, I mean, he's not Chris Branson, but he's getting there, right? Like, he's already in the millions. Chris Branson is 32 millions. Like, if you look for Chris Branson, let me show you. If we look for Chris Branson, right? I mean, this is 32.9 because it's rounded up, but in reality, I think the actual number is 32.8, 82 or something like that. No, sorry, 88. No, 82. And you can also like combine multiple filters, right? So you can say, well, show me Chris Brandon and show me Troy Pickett, because I want to see how they compare, right? So what you do, you can click on this box and it will add Troy Pickett to this selection, right? And you can see here that Troy Pickett is 1 order of magnitude below, but he's already in the millions, right? And you can also add Morgan Hyder, right? So the other attorney that is doing this, right? Have been working on this project. So you can see here, oh, sorry, I made a mistake. So we were talking about Branson and about Pickett, right? So you can see that of them all, of this set of 3 attorneys that I'm describing, right? All of them focusing on targeting children. The lowest ranking one of this set is Morgan Heimler. So she's the more junior, right? And you can see here clearly that Pickett controls Morgan Heimler, right? And probably, because this is really at the end a distributed system, I imagine Troy Pickett reports to Chris Branson, right, in some capacity, dotted line, or I don't know exactly what is the mechanics, but I imagine, right, there must be a reporting connection between relationship, right? Could be indirect. It could be that, Troy Pickett reports to that guy that is running for judge. Oh, that is a very dangerous one, right? This one. So if you look for judge, well, let me tell you, right, how I saw it. Let me tell you how I saw it. If you pivot by case, which is, I think, is the 3rd page, right? If you pivot by case and you filter by Pickett, right? But this shows you how powerful this tool is, right? So I'm gonna filter by Pickett, right? Okay, so Troy Pickett has 4 cases, right? I mean, and this is already very telling, right? And I before I started this demo, I said to myself, I'm not going to, give you my conclusions because I don't want to bias you, right? Like really, this is an invitation for you to use this, to watch this and use this and draw your own conclusions by yourself, right? Make your own mind. But I mean, this is just impossible not to say, right? Like, so Troy Pickett, the same attorney, has 4 cases in front of the Supreme Court. And they are distributed, they're coming, I mean, all these cases came from different appellate courts, where they, of course, got denied, because otherwise they wouldn't be before the Supreme Court. Like, I mean, whatever petition they made, all these 4 people, made in front of the appellate court got denied, and that's why they are seeking relief in the Supreme Court. But anyhow, there's one of these cases, I think it's this one. Let's see, 250362. Let's debug this for a second. Okay. So let's select these 4, right, where we know Pickett is. And then I'm just showing you how to play with the filters, right? Because there's a little tricks that you can learn how to do, and then you could become very proficient at this. So what I did, I first selected Pickett, so I could, when you select something in a filter, all the other filters get updated with the values that only apply, right? So I guess I should show you that. Let me show you that. So see, if I do this, right? I'm going to reset it to start from, okay. No, sorry. Let me see. Okay, cases, right? So I want to go to cases. Okay. So what I want to do is this. What I want to show you is this, right? So see how many cases there are, right? There are literally more than 1,000 cases, right? Because I downloaded the data. And see how many attorneys there are, right? And all these attorneys that are here are because they're marked in the index. This number that you see here on the right represents the amount of the scores that they have in the Venezuelan Intelligence database. If an attorney has a case in front of the appellate court and they did not match the database, they would not appear here, right? So there's nobody here that is not marked in the database, is what I'm trying to say. So the little trick I wanted to show you is that you can start by selecting, for example, I want to show you how you can play with the 2 filters at the same time, right? So you can, for example, start with Pickett, right? You select Troy Pickett, and that will cause it so that these other all the filters are going to be updated to only the things that apply to Pickett across all his different cases. Like you can see here, right? That he is associated strongly with the Hunt law firm, and the other one, the OWR. There's a bug. I don't know why that doesn't show up in the filters, but I'll debug that later. So he has two firms. He's associated with two firms: the Hunt law firm, which is, I think, the real entity, and the OW. I shouldn't say that. The OW layers is prominent. I'm going to show you why I say that. But okay, so once you select Picket, right, you get the cases updated here, right? So now what you can do, you can force it to only have those cases, right? And after you do that, you can remove the condition of Picket. What this will do, it will show you who is co-clustered with Picket. It will show you other people that has worked with Picket in other cases, right? Because I'm now selecting only by the cases where Picket is present, right? Right, right. So you see here, where is he? I saw him here somewhere. No, but this is not filtered. Right. So I'm gonna edit it to show you what I mean, right? But I'll revert the change in a bit. Okay. So I'm gonna do the same thing, but I'm going to add a column, which is going to be the representative. Okay. Okay. So we have all the cases where Picket is, right? No, but I think this is not working, this filtering, because it's too many cases. And they're different cases, right? So the filter is not. Oh, I know why. I know why. I think it's because of this. I made a mistake. Yes. I think it's that. No, it's not that. I have to debug it. For some reason, that filter doesn't seem to be working very well. But anyhow, to cut to the chase, what I want to show you is that Pickett is, in one of these cases in the Supreme Court of Texas, associated with, in fact, I think there's a way to see that. Let me see. Let me revert that change that I made, right? So what I'm going to do to debug this is I'm going to go again and find Pickett, right? Okay. And so it's one of these cases, right? And which is not mine. So it's either 362, 87. I'm going to make a note of them, right? 362, 877, and 161. 161. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the attorney's page, and I'm going to look for those cases to see which one is the one I'm looking for. What I want to show you is that there is a person that is marked in the index, have an appellate case, a Supreme Court case in front of the Supreme Court, alongside with Pickett, and is running for judge, right? And he's marking the index. And is associated with the OW lawyers law firm in, I think it's in Austin. So obviously, right, an important player, because if he's, I mean, if he's marking the index and he's running for judge, or, he probably is going to get it, right? One way or the other. So, it's, but what I want to see is if the case is one of those cases that Pickett has targeting children, right? Because he's not only, Pickett doesn't only have my case. I saw at least one more. That it's obviously a case about a children, right? A child. So I want to see if that is the case where the other person from OW lawyer is, because that would be pretty, it would be pretty damaging, right? Like, I mean, the two of them from the two working from the two law firm, the OW lawyers law firm, both marking the geo-index of the Venezuelan Intelligence Services, and both targeting children in the Supreme Court, right? Or using the Supreme Court to target children. I think it's a better way to put it. So the cases are 362. Let me find that, right? So 0362, I'm going to start by filtering by that one. Okay, so this only says Troy Pickett. 877. Yeah, this one. So the case that I'm referring to that I saw is the 877. Right? So 25-0877. So now let's go to the cases page. To the cases. So what I want to show you is this one, right? So that this dot Frankfurt for judge. And if you go to Google, and you look him up, oh, they removed it already. That's funny. Frankfurt. I made a mistake. Oh, this one, right? So he's running for the Court of Appeals, place 3. Right? Imagine that would be perfect, because then the cases can progress past that. Right? It's a way to block them. But anyhow, let's see, right, what happens. And he is associated with the Old W lawyers firm where Pickett works. So what I'm curious to understand is if this case, which again is the 0877, if it's about a child, okay? And the way we can do that is by going into the cases tab and filtering by that case, because we will be able to see the style here, right? So if it says in the interest of, it's a child. So it's the 877, right? So let me do that. A77, right? I have to go here. Yes. A77. Okay. So it says Dirk Wendell Sheridan. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not targeting a child, because, for example, if you look at my case, it says my name, which I realize was a mistake on my part, right? I mean, when I filed, because I'm acting pro se, I didn't understand this, right? When I filed with the appellate court, even with the appellate court, well, actually, it wasn't my mistake, because they choose the styling, right? This is actually very interesting. The clerks, when I think they choose the styling. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, because I filed the document and they changed the styling, but at least in the first appellate court, and they use as a styling my name, right? But if you think about it, it should be the name of the child, because I'm doing this because I'm trying to protect the right of the child to be with his father, right? I mean, of course, I miss the child, and I also want to protect my parental rights, but the rights of the child are being violated, right? But when they style the case, they style it as it's a personal thing of Rinaldo, right? They did not include the child. But if you look at this docket, you will see there are 51 cases out of 1,000 that are clearly marked as in the interest of a child, right? So it makes me wonder why these clerks, in my case, did not put the child, did not put in the interest of the child in the styling. They put in the interest of Rinaldo, right? I don't know. Seems I wonder, right, why the cases are styled different. But anyhow, that's a small thing, right? Well, it's a small thing, but it could have strategic implications, right? Because any action they take, in these cases where they're saying they're acting in the interest of the child, by default, people will think that they're protecting the child. But in reality, they are targeting the child, right? So that is it's interesting, right? It's a bit cynical in a way. But anyhow, right. So what I was going to say, if you look at my case, for example, right, style, right? So if you look for my name here in style, you will see that my case doesn't say in the interest of a child, but it's clearly about a child, right? So it makes me wonder about this case, 877, right? Now, note that this case, 877, has a score of 25 million. I mean, the attorneys involved in this operation with this case, 877, combined have a score in that database of Diosdado Cabello, a score of 25 million. And Troy Pickett only has 2 million, right? 2.6. So it means that whoever else is contributing the other 22 million, they're heavy, right? Um, and if you compare that to my case, it only has like 3 million, 2.2 or 2.6 coming from Pickett, and the other 600K coming from Morgan Heibner. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot more energy and effort and importance probably in this case, right? Whatever it is, I don't know if it's a child, but it's something related to Dirk Wendell Sheridan, right? And it's something that is important because they put top people in that case, right? 25 million points are working on that case. You can see it that way, right? Like it's a way of understanding network dynamics, right? Like the logic is, if you're running a network like this, you are going to allocate the resources in a way that is efficient. You're not going to take your best resource, right? Your most effective. I don't want to say best because it sounds like they're doing something good, but your most effective agent, you're not going to use it for a low-level case because it's a waste of resources, and also it brings unnecessary exposure to that important agent. You have to protect him, right? Like if he's an important agent, you need to protect him for your own good, right? So he can keep working for you. So it's pointless to expose an agent in something that is low level, right? That's the logic. But if we look at this is interesting, right? Right. So in this case, you can see that this person, Todd Frankfurt from OW Lawyers, that is running for appellate judge, nevertheless, is working with Richard E. Gray. Oh, Richard E. Gray is the heavy one, right? He's the top ranking person. His score is larger than Chris Branson, and he works side by side with Pickett in this case, right? So that's very interesting, right? So that tells you that Pickett, I don't know, I think I said this, like I hypothesized about this because I hadn't built this dashboard back then when I said this, but I said just by pure logic, they are going to bring one of the top or most effective people to this, right? I'm talking about Pickett. When they brought Pickett to work on the first appellate court case. And then he deceived the court and all that, right? But I said that based on logic, right? I had not built this dashboard, but now I see the dashboard and I see how effective Pickett must be that he's working side by side with this other person that is the top player. I'm talking about Richard E. Gray, right? His score is higher than the score of Chris Branson. Right? He's the top player in this area, right? Remember, this is only looking at the courts that are before the Supreme Court of Texas in year 2025. But what I was going to say, right? If we go to right, so here we can see it, right? So this case, I don't know if it would be this case. Let me see. X77, right? Yes. So it seems like this could be the case that they're working on. I don't know. I don't know if that's the case, but it could be. Well, one way to see it, we can add the column here just to test, right? We can add the column for the cost number to see if it matches A77. Yes, it is, right? You can see it here. So it is this case. So what I can do, right? And we know that it's on the 53rd district court. So one thing we can do a search to see what comes back on that. Okay, yes, here's the case. Yeah, it's a divorce case, you see? So although the caption doesn't say in the interest of, it is probably a very similar situation, right? Yeah, it's a divorce, but look, these people, this is so standardized. Look, they put in this decree a a non-disclosure clause, right? Like a censorship clause. And I discussed this before in my own case, right, where Morgan Heitner, in the fabricated orders that she at the end, right, made the judge sign, she and Pickett made the judge sign those fraudulent orders when the court had no jurisdiction. And I talked about this before. In those orders, if you look at them, they have a clause that say that I cannot talk about anything that happened in the divorce, because it's a way of censorship, right? It's a way to make the target not speak. So it says the PMA included a non-disclosure provision prohibiting Dirk from communicating. So I can see, well, I cannot see, but I imagine that the target is Dirk, right? Because they're putting a non-disclosure clause that would shut him up, right? And then a threatening clause, right? Any violation by Dirk would also result in financial obligations of the. So if he disclosed anything about what he saw, then he loses his home, right? That's what it's saying. And then there's a dispute about the censorship clause. That's what it is, right? So, you know, what I always say, right? If it walks like a dog, it quacks like a dog, it looks like a dog, and it's marked in the index of Diosdado Cabello like a dog, it's probably a dog. Well, I should change that saying. I'm going to say a cat, right? If it looks like a cat, it walks like a cat, it makes sounds like a cat, and it's marked in the index of Diosdado Cabello like a cat, it's probably a cat, right? So this is super interesting. So in this case, it's not a children targeting case, but it's a divorce case, right? And they're putting a lot of effort into that case, right? And this person used to work in the health services department somewhere. So it could be that he saw something in those messages, right, that would be damaging to the network, and then, boom, they trigger this, right? But anyhow, I guess authorities, if anybody from the authorities see these videos, please, approach Mr. Dirk to see if maybe there is something there, right? But according to the data, just by looking at the data and the level of effort they're putting into this person, I mean, I'm talking about the 40-something million points, the 25-something million points that are attributable to this case, right? Using the smearing technique that I described before. So you see, in this using this dashboard, you can debug the cases, the attorneys, the firms, the courts, the district courts, the appellate courts, everything. And I try to make it as usable as I could, right? I will keep improving it, but I think it's a very mature product at this point. Now I want to show you, this is an interesting feature I built into it, which is the tags. Okay, so in this data pipeline that I built to do this, which I'm going to give you the queries on everything, it computes tags using the hit counter that I described in the previous segment, the previous technical segment. And based on those tags, it assigns these icons, right? So I put graphic icons, right? So the baby means that it's targeting a children. And I mean the case, right? That a child is being targeted in this case. The crown means that this is this case touches or is related to an important player. It could be the party, it could be one of the attorneys, it could be the judge that is in the court, in the lower court. Like they could be many things, but there is an important player in this case, right? That's the king marker, right? Which, as things progress and people start learning more about this network, you will see that the themes related to how do you call that? To royalty, right? Like things related to king or queens or crowns, or I'm talking about images and words in different languages, are markers that represent a status, high status in this network, right? That's why the house that is in front of Robert Mueller's is somebody called Daniel King Everett, right? Because to live, not anybody can live in front of Robert Mueller for obvious reasons, right? So it has to be somebody who is very trusted by the network, and that's why he has the king in the name. So, but when you use this, right, you can click on this icon of the baby, right, and you will see how industrialized this is, right. So in this view, you can see attorneys and how many cases they have matching this criteria of targeting a child. And these, remember, these are cases that are in the Supreme Court before, that have been before the Supreme Court of Texas in the year 2025. This means that somebody's parental rights were violated in the trial court time ago. The person appealed and got no relief from the appellate court, and then finally came to the Supreme Court, and maybe did not get relief either, right? But there was a sequence of violations. For these cases to be here, it means that this person suffered a series of different violations of their parental rights, probably, right? Looking at the numbers in the index. Now, this is interesting because if you look at this, right, it says that it has there's 51 unique cases that match this condition that I'm describing, meaning there are children being targeted and are in front of the Supreme Court of Texas in the year 2025. If you remove the filter, you will see that the total number of cases that have attorney's mark is 355. I mean, this is I think this is a smoking gun, right? Because if you do the math, and let's do the math right here, what percentage is 51 of 350, 351 was it? 355, right? I just want to know what is the percentage of attorneys of the network that are concentrating or that are working on targeting children, right? In cases that are or that have been before the Supreme Court of Texas in 2025, right? It's 100. It's 14%. That is a number that is super, super high. I'm talking about this as a statistician, right? The reason I say this is because, well, I mean, I have to give like a train of thought on this, right? For somebody's parental rights to be impacted in a way that a child's interest has to be put in front of the Supreme Court, it has to be that one of the parents, suffered a violation or a termination of the parental rights, or they were served in some way or limited in some way, right? Because that's what will bring the interest of the child to this court, right? For that to happen, there is a small set of circumstances that could justify that, right? One is that the person is crazy, right? Which is what they are targeting me with. They're saying that I'm crazy because I'm saying these things, and they want to kill two birds with one stone, right? To subdue me and at the same time discredit what I'm saying. And the other reason is criminal charges, right? Like the situation I see that could be the case. I'm saying could be. I don't know if it's the case or not. Like the authorities need to investigate this, but by looking at the data, it seems that suggests, it hints that that could be the case with that person, Paul Nanes, right? In that case, it's criminal charges, right? For whatever reason, right? They could use different reasons. I imagine in some cases they would use drugs. In some cases they would use indecency with a child. They would randomize it, right? So it doesn't look, so the pattern is not visible, clearly visible. But those are basically the reasons, right? Endangering a child, committing a crime, or being crazy, right? So if you think about the number that I just showed you, 14%, almost 15% of the cases in this group handled by this group of attorneys marked in the index, this suggests that the 50% of the cases are related to those things. And this cannot be possible because it would mean, I mean, if you think about it statistically, right? This is like a funnel of progression of cases, right? So first of all, across all the population in Texas, two people or two parties had to have a disagreement that resulted in a legal action. Then there has been a judgment that resulted in a petition for relief on an appellate court, which then was denied, and then that resulted in a petition for relief in the Supreme Court of Texas, right? So if you think about all the people in Texas, right? Well, the percentage of people that are going to have legal problems should be representative of the distribution of the population, right? So I guess what I'm saying is that for this to be true, that 14% of the cases across this group of attorneys that are marking this index, that to say that that is a random occurrence, it would mean basically that either that 40% of the population of Texas, at least 40% of the population of Texas, has to be a combination of crazy or criminal, right? Because otherwise, there's no way to explain that 40% of the cases of these attorneys are going to end up in this category. Like, how does this happen? For this to be random, this would mean that the same distribution should be present in the general population, right? And that is not true. You cannot say that 40% of everybody is crazy or criminal. That is definitely not true, right? And not only criminal to a point that would justify serving the parental rights or affecting the parent-child relationship. So this shows that this is that there is design behind this, and that the targeting of children is a fundamental centerpiece of this design, right? Which is very concerning. The other thing that it shows, right? If you select the tag baby, some of these cases, if you read the styles, they mention multiple children, right? And they don't mention the names; they mention them by initials. But you can tell by the number of initials that you see that there are multiple of them. So if you sum them up, this means I haven't done the math, right? But it could be 80, 90, 100 children, because there are cases that have more than one, and there's 51 unique cases. So this means that potentially maybe even 100 children, right, were targeted in this way, that their cases ended up in the Supreme Court of Texas. This is not the full set. These are the ones that have the resources, the means, the patience, and the will to escalate the fight to the Supreme Court, right? Going through all the processes in the trial court, and I'm telling you that from experience. I'm telling you this as it's not a priest talking about marriage, right? I did all these things myself. I've been fencing them off on the trial court, and then I went to the appellate court twice. I went to the administrative court twice, and then I went to the. So I've been doing this for 9 months, and I've been doing this using technology, which doesn't cost me much money, right? But if you are doing this paying a lawyer, this would have costed me probably $200,000 minimum, right? Minimum, I would say. So this subset that you're seeing here of that could be. I'm not going to say it's 100 children because I haven't counted them, but I don't know, conservatively, let's say that 75. Let's say that it's 75 children. This set of 75 children are only the ones that had parents that had the patience, the resources, and the will to escalate this to the Supreme Court. And maybe it gets denied, right? But what this tells you is that on the lower side of the funnel, right, on the trial courts, this must be at least 1 order of magnitude higher. So there must be, I'm telling you this statistically based on the experience I have looking at this data and working on it. I would estimate, and this is a gross estimate, like I'm not, I haven't done the math, right? But I would put the number at around 750, right? There must be at least 750 children per year targeted in Texas by this network in this way. And this is just Texas, right? It's one state. Extrapolate that to the entire country. And after you do that, extrapolate that to the entire planet, right? And then you will understand how is that the Communist Party of China is controlling the world. They're subduing everybody by doing this, right? Everybody that gets in their way. So it's an industrialized process at massive scale, right? So that's what I was telling you at the beginning, that when I understood this 2 days ago, when I saw this dashboard the first time when I built it, I feel differently, right? Because I understand this is, if anything, I had it easy, right? So far, I've had it easy because there's people that they have put in jail to create the pretext to take the children, right? So those are people that have lost their freedom and their children, right? I mean, it's mind-boggling, really. But so you have the tag, right? You have the tag, how to identify those cases. Now you also have the crown tag. These are the key players, like the kings of this network, right? And you can see them there, right? What else? Yes. So if we look at the cases, right, at this view, right, the cases alone. I'm gonna reset this, right? This is something that is very interesting to me when I saw this, right? So if you filter in this cases page by the babies, right, the baby icon, the tag for targeting children, this chart on the right represents the scores that are smeared into those cases, in which courts of appeal they were handled before getting to the Supreme Court. And you look at this distribution, you can see here that the First Court of Appeals is, the main avenue in terms of how the scores are flowing to the Supreme Court. So, I mean, this is something, you see this, and I ask authorities to show this to a statistician. Like, you see this, and you see that this cannot be random. Like, there's intelligent design, and there's purpose behind the people operating that institution, being in those institutions. So that's what I was telling you at the beginning, that my comments are not a comment about the institution, are a comment about the people that are temporarily occupying positions in those institutions, right? And we have to be clear about that. It's the people, right? And the comment I was making at the beginning about the political leaders doing this thing of associating themselves with of either the people, the country, right? It's a danger. I mean, when I saw this, right, and I realized the danger of the comments, right, about the institution, right, because people could think that the institution is doing this. It's not the institution; it's the people that are in the institution that have the institution captured. I started thinking, right, about comments I've made, and I see how it works, right? Like, for example, in many occasions I've said, "Oh, because the Venezuelans did this," right? But that is not true. It's not the Venezuelans, right? It's a small group of individuals that happen to be, hijacking the institutions of Venezuela. But it's not like the entire country of Venezuela is doing this, right? But because they associate themselves and they've been in power for so long, then people see a situation and say, "Oh, it's the Venezuelans," but it's not the Venezuelans. It's a small group of individuals that are temporarily occupying positions of power and capturing those institutions that way. So it's important to make that distinction, right, between who are the people doing it and that they are not the institution. Those are two very different things. So yes, so I invite you to play with this dashboard, and see the different features, and there's a lot of insights that can be derived from this, right? Anyhow, I think I'm gonna stop it here. But before I go on this, before I finish this session, I want to tell you a couple of things. One is that when I started working on this pipeline, right, and I started fetching the data from the public website of the Supreme Court of Texas, the next day they started on a campaign of harassment, right? They did two things. One, I'm telling you this not to complain, but it's very telling, right? So it's a long story, but they had created, Troy Pickett had sent me, well, not Troy Pickett, he had a third party that was not him, and is not an authorized filer in the case, filed a document like 3 weeks ago, more, 5 weeks ago, about a hearing on the 16th. But the hearing never appeared on the docket, right? But as soon as I started working on this 2 days ago, they created the hearing in the docket. And the hearing didn't say what it was. It didn't say, and it just said, in fact, let me show you the hearing. Right? I think I have a screenshot somewhere over here. Okay, this one. Right. So the hearing, you can see that it was created, and it says only other hearing, but it doesn't say anything. It doesn't say what it is for. And this is an improper hearing for two reasons. One, it doesn't say what it's about. So how can I prepare for something that they're not? I mean, this could be a hearing between the judge and Pickett, right? Like, it's not saying that. Secondly, when they send me that notice, that person that sent me that notice is not a person that is authorized to file in this case. The only persons that are authorized to file are Pickett, Morgan Heibner, and Tina Simon. And those are the people that, so when I see this thing coming from this person that I don't recognize, I ignore it, right? I don't know what to do with that. Then they created this thing at the last minute, 12 hours before the hearing, right? And it doesn't say what is it about. So of course, right? And I filed an objection to this because it's an improper notice, and they don't respond to the objection. So they go and have the hearing without me, right? And they enter a default judgment, right? But this is a harassment campaign to distract me, right? It's not. I mean, the goal is not what they did was to impose sanctions on me for like $6,000, something like I don't know, right? But that's not the goal. I mean, it's not the $6,000. It's to distract me. They think that I was going to get distracted by that and start panicking or complaining or making demos about that and not work in the dashboard, right? Because they already saw how I built the dashboard for the first court of appeals, right? So they know I have the pipeline ready. They see me downloading the data. They make the conclusion, this guy is going to do the same, but with the Supreme Court of Texas, right? So they panic, figure this. But what is amazing to me is that they had this weapon prepared 5 weeks ago, and they had not used it, right? In all this time, they have not created that hearing. They have not harassed me with the sanctions, nothing, right? They were waiting, but the state of panic was so big that they did this last minute, 2 days ago, right? I think it's a mistake because, well, now I have more evidence that they're creating these orders without hearings, right? But it doesn't, like, they don't care about that. It tells me that at this point the network doesn't care about the liability of Pickett or the judge, or like they don't care about any of that. What they care about is that this information doesn't get out, right? If they have to sacrifice 10 judges to do that, they will do it, right? So that's interesting. And the second thing that they did, and this is amazing, right? So I have 2 federal cases pending, right, where they don't let me even serve the defendants, right? And those cases are stalled. Like, they never take action, they never order, like, they're just stalled, right? Like, they don't let me move forward, right? So the next day, so I started fetching the data for the cases, right, from the Supreme Court during the night. The next morning, they send me this little piece, right? Oh no, not this one. Where is it? Oh, this one. Right. So I got a notification saying that they had made a decision. Well, not a decision, a recommendation on the case against Elon Musk, and the recommendation was to dismiss the case without prejudice. Prejudice. You can say here, right? It says memorandum and recommendation. The court recommends this case be dismissed without prejudice. Objections to M and R due by 12/31/2025. And then I open the document. I'm going to do it here, but I open it, and it says that they're recommending this because I haven't served the defendants. And I already filed the motion asking them to give me the summons again and the authorization, because otherwise the service will be invalid. It's past the 90 days time limit, and they know that, right? So if I serve them, the other party is going to get the case dismissed because I served them outside of the 90 days window. So I need authorization from the judge. Everybody knows that, right? They don't give authorization, and then they do this. But what's interesting is that they choose to do this at the same time that they started I would call it not even harassing, because it didn't harass me, right? But pseudo harassing. Like, they think that they're going to distract me with that, right? But they did it at the same time, and the goal was the same, right? They think I care about this, and they think I'm going to drop everything to go to the federal court to file a document, right? It's silly, right? I know that this is not the solution to the problem, obviously. And I know this is not the venue where this is going to be litigated. This is going to be litigated in a very different venue. I can, I can put my money on that. But they think, right, they thought that I would get distracted. And the objective of doing that was so I would, go stop working on that and go outside and go to the federal court, and maybe they would have an opportunity to cause a car accident or something, right? Something that would delay me, right? So the information doesn't get out, right? I'm not saying that we're going to kill me with a traffic accident, but they could do something, right, to cause a problem that I have to take care of, and I cannot delay, right? So that would introduce delay, right? But if you think about it, it's exactly the same thing that happened when I started building this dashboard showing where the top people in Caracas and Beijing are, right? took the child immediately, right, to distract me. So all this saga really has been a distraction, right? So I cannot move fast enough. Uh, but it's been futile because as you can see, I have been moving forward, right? In terms of producing data that is actionable and that is consumable by anybody, regardless of country, level of education, language, right? That's my goal. Internationalize this to to a point that anybody can consume it. And I'm almost there. So that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to tell you is a small thing. This is something that the Venezuelan informant told me, okay? It's not verified, so take it with a grain of salt. But he told me that he thinks that what really happened, I'm going to tell you this because, I imagine, right, authorities eventually will be able to investigate this, right, and interrogate these people. So if this is what happened, this will show authorities that what the things that the Venezuelan informant told me are true, right? And all of them have been true. Of course, there's a risk that what he's telling me is not completely accurate, that he was fed bad information, to discredit what I'm. So I say it, and then he gets discredited, right? But I think what he told me makes sense. So I'm going to say it because I think it's highly likely that it's possible. So this is what he told me that happened. What he heard was that what happened was that in one occasion last week or 2 weeks ago, I went to Walmart with my former partner, and she started crying, saying that she was basically, and I'm sorry for saying these things because I don't want to drag that kind of things into this conversation, right? But she was crying, saying that she was in financial distress, right? That she needed money. And I said, and because they've done this in the past to me, right? Where she does that, and then I say that I'm going to help her, and then they are going to try to construct that as a contract, right? To then sue me civilly for breach of contract. So what I said was, listen, this is not a contract, not an offer, but I'm going to try to help you, okay? In a way that is possible for me within my means and within my time frame. This is not a contract, it's not an offer, it's not a settlement offer. This is just me trying to help you, if I can help you, right? So I made that comment, right? So what the Venezuelan informant told me is that they recorded that and they took that to the judge. That's the reason why it's important that I wasn't there, because if I'm there, I'm going to, dispute that. I'm going to explain what happened. But they showed some form of this to the judge, apparently, right? This is what the Venezuelan informant thinks, to justify an ex parte hearing, right? With a narrative, we don't know exactly what they said because we weren't there, but the narrative, something along the lines of, this is a litigious person and he's trying to drive her into bankruptcy. Maybe also using the comments that they recorded when they did that ruse with Penelope Suarez, which is dangerous to them because they know that I added Penelope Suarez to the other lawsuit, right? So when they get investigated and this gets into the record and she gets interrogated, it's going to be game over, right? Because this is going to show that they were working with the Venezuelan intelligence from the very beginning, right? But anyhow, I'm not going to get ahead of myself. But the point is that they went to the judge, supposedly, right, or probably, with this narrative that I'm trying to just intimidate her and bankrupt her, right, to make her go into bankruptcy. And this, in their minds, justifies the judge signing an order without me being there, right, without violating my right to the process. But this is silly, right? They're like children because, even the worst criminals in the society have the right to due process. Like even serial killers have the right to be in their trial, right? So, this is obviously a fabrication they're making, right? But even if it was true, I have the right to be there, right? To hear what they're saying and to object to it. But they took away that right with that narrative, thinking that will isolate them and the judge from liability, right? Which I think is silly, right? If that's what they did, it's silly because this is not, as you can see in this dashboard that I'm showing you, right? This is a problem that at the end, I'm guessing the solution is going to be a worldwide solution, right? This is not going to be something litigated in the 387 court or in the First Court of Appeals or even in the Supreme Court of Texas, right? I think. So I don't know. I think it's it's a naive, not silly, naive. It seems to me like it's a naive way of thinking. I think they really haven't understood yet what is happening. It's the only conclusion I can draw from this. But anyhow, I guess we'll see. So of course, I got another invitation to the Walmart today, right? I imagine they want to do a second take. I want to do this again, another session of, crying in a public place because, like if you see a person, I mean, and I said this before, I have no animosity towards her. In fact, I want to help her, right? I care about her, right? Regardless of what happened. And I see her crying in the way that she's crying, and but there is a fiber in me that wants to help, right? But they're weaponizing that. So anyhow, I got another invitation today. So today, if authorities are interested, we can all do this at the Walmart, and then you can record them recording it, right? So I think it's going to be at the Walmart today at something like 3:30 p.m. That's the time I think we're going to all be there to record this session, right? Let's do it. I mean, they haven't understood that what I'm doing is gathering evidence, right? So I mean, let's do this. Let's do it today. Anyhow, so I think I'm going to stop this session for now, but please have a look at the dashboard. I think it's a very powerful tool because it allows to, understand, debug the problem, right? Find things very quickly, understand who are the key pieces of the machine, right? But more importantly, because it allows to scale this to country scale, to planet scale. Like all you have to do is to, so this is an ETL pipeline, right? Where I ingest the data, transform it, and load it. All you have to do is change the beginning of the pipeline to store the data in the same format that I'm doing in BigQuery. As long as you do that, everything else will work. The dashboard will work. All you have to do is change the table name. The queries will work. By the way, the queries, I'm going to put them here. In fact, let me do that right away. I emailed myself the queries that I used, and I'm going to put them all here so everybody in the planet can, use them. The data sets are open, and anybody can read the data. All you have to do is run the queries in your own Google Cloud project. But the query, the data itself is open. It's an open data. So what I'm going to do, I have this folder here called Labs, which is shared and is linked in the channel. So I'm going to create a new folder that is going to be called Supreme Court of Texas 2025. Okay. And let me add the actual. Let me do this right because otherwise I might forget. And okay. Okay. So these are the queries that I used to produce the tables at the end, and I'll put them in sequence. So I will add a prefix to each file indicating which query you have to run first, right? But your goal should be to load a table with your data in the same format that I'm using in the first query. If you do that, after that, all the queries will work. And then you can basically scale this very quickly to any other country, right? To any other court, any other legal system that you want. And in fact, even you can do this for other things that are not legal systems. You can do this for schools, for example, school districts, right? What you have to do is replace the actors, right? So instead of a court, it's a school. Instead of a judge, it's a director, right? Instead of an attorney, it's a teacher, right? If you do that mapping, you can easily use the same framework. In fact, I think this is one step of generalization I'm going to do, because in the fields in the table, yeah, this is exactly what I need to do. So instead of calling them judges, court, etc., I'm going to call them, something that is generic, that is applicable to any system, to any societal system. That way, I will give you a framework that will scale universally, right, for any societal system. Because at the end, it's the same. Like the type of attack is always the same, the 2% attack. And that's, again, one more reason why I want to ask you to not take it personally against these institutions. Right? The institutions are not the party that is guilty here. It is the people that are capturing the institutions. Right? That's what we need to concentrate on. Well, with that comment and that thought, I'm going to thank you for your time today, and I'll see you in the next demo. Goodbye.